Well, the film does what a film can do, and it doesn't do what a film cannot do. So sometimes people are demanding of the film that it do things that it can't do. So, for example, we can't raid the stash houses. That's going to have to be law enforcement. As you know, Robert, through the vote, by doing the geo tracking, they have the cell phone IDs of these mules. Each of our cell phones has a unique and distinctive ID. It's not the cell phone number, it's a cell phone ID, but it's not the name of the mule. So what law enforcement does typically is they go to a judge, they get a warrant based on probable cause, and there's plenty of probable cause in the movie. And then you go and unmask the mules. You go to the cell phone provider, they give you their names. You go see these guys. You go, hey, listen, who put you up to this? Who organized it? Now, the thing to remember here is that it's not just that True the Vote came up with a brilliant guess. They had a hotline, and somebody came to them in Georgia, a whistleblower, who said, basically, he didn't use this language, I'm a mule. I do this. And they go, really? How much do you get paid? $10 a ballot. I got even more in the runoffs. And are you alone? Are you like a clever entrepreneur? He goes, are you kidding? There's a whole operation doing this. But he goes, but I don't want to be involved. Don't use my name. I'm not going to come forward. I don't want to get beaten up. I'm going to disappear after I've told you this. So True the Vote realized, listen, we can't use this guy. We don't even have a name. But what we can do is we can use this geo-tracking to see if we can validate what this guy is saying. If there's a big movement of all these people doing this, that should be trackable through their phones. So that's what, if you're thinking of this as a scientific experiment, the hypothesis comes from the whistleblower. And then True the Vote develops an experiment, the geo-tracking, and then the video in rare cases. It's almost like, the video will tell you if your geo-tracking is solid, because quite frankly, if your geo-tracking shows that Robert Barnes's phone is at Dropbox number 3 at 2 a.m. in the morning, and that happens to be a Dropbox that has a camera, you should be able to go look at that exact time, and there should be Robert Barnes stuffing ballots in the box, and sure enough, there he is. That's really, I think, what makes the movie so persuasive. And so coming back to the fact checkers, they made a big mess in their first round of attacks because they said stupid stuff that was not even believable to the ordinary reader. And that's why they realized we now need to bring in a sort of A-team, Philip Bump of the Washington Post, and let's bring in some guys who can make more sophisticated critiques of the movie. And so I've been responding to those ever since.
Dinesh, if I may, and this is not because I think there's any legitimacy to it, it's just to talk about the A-team of fact checkers. Can we see this article from jan6.com? I don't know how legitimate this website is, but this is when you get into the talk about character assassinations that you're accused of in your Obama documentary. Dinesh D'Souza, convicted of election fraud, releases new film 2000 Mules investigating election fraud in 2020. Dinesh D'Souza pled guilty to felony election fraud in 2014. He served. We'll get to that later. Then they go through the alleged fact check, whatever. But assassinate the character, then get into the purported fact check. Dinesh, one of the major criticisms of the documentary was that all you had were, what was it, a half dozen videos, maybe 12 videos of individuals allegedly, putting in more ballots than they should have been putting in. If this were as rampant as you say it is, you should have had more video evidence. What's the response to that?
Well,
yeah, sorry.
It's very important to realize how little video is truly available. There are whole states, Wisconsin, that took no video at all. Now, remember, it is required in the election rules that you do video. These states said, we'll do it, we're going to do it. They didn't do it. Even the Zuckerberg money had the condition of doing video surveillance. There are other places, Arizona, Maricopa County, where they had video cameras and they were turned off. They were not functioning. As I mentioned, there are other places where you have cameras, but they're not pointed at the Dropbox. And so you can see absolutely nothing. Most of our video is from Fulton County, Georgia. There's some from Arizona. There's a little bit from Michigan. But almost think of it this way. Out of every 50 Dropboxes, 2 or 3 have surveillance. So our expectations have to come out of that. It's almost like, if I can give an analogy, you have a serial killer who goes to 10 different homes, kills 10 different people, and leaves his physical DNA at all of them. Obviously, in our case, we're not talking about physical DNA, we're talking about digital DNA, but let's grant that the validity of that analogy. However, only one of the 10 homes happens to have a video camera. And so you notice that he got to that home at 3 in the morning. You turn on the video camera, you look at 3 in the morning, there he is. So just as expected, the guy is on the scene, and the validity of the DNA evidence is solid. In fact, most people will tell you in a murder trial that the DNA is better than the eyewitness evidence, because the DNA doesn't lie. Now, obviously, with a cell phone, I can give the cell phone to my wife, and maybe she's at the drop box, but that my cell phone is at that location is not open to reasonable doubt. So then along comes Ben Shapiro and others, and they say, hey, listen, I want to see video of the serial killer in all the 10 homes. And I go, listen, if all the 10 homes had a video, they had cameras, and I couldn't show them to you, this would be a serious defect of my case, because I can tell you they were there based on the phone. They should be on the video. But if I'm telling you that only 1 out of 10 places had video, then all that you can reasonably ask is show me that at the exact time that the guy is supposed to be there, that he was there. And sure enough, I can show you that. So there are some limitations in the film, but they're not limitations because I'm holding the video or I'm not deploying the evidence. It's that the evidence is not available due to the negligence of the states in doing their job and putting proper video cameras. I mean, think about it. We have video cameras every Home Depot, every mall, every ATM. This is not that hard to do. And I think in some cases, it's probably deliberate as to why they didn't do it.
But Dinesh, I mean, this is the interesting thing. The fact checkers try to hold against you the fact, let's call it the dearth of video evidence, and part and parcel of your documentary as to the potential election fraud is that where there ought to have been video surveillance, there wasn't. That in and of itself is a problem. I didn't misunderstand that part of the documentary.
Yeah, I was simply saying that to demand the presence of video where video was never taken is an unreasonable demand. And the analogy that I gave of the serial killer, if only 1 of the 10 homes had surveillance, you would only reasonably expect that in the one case where he showed up at that home, we see him on the camera. And if you do, case closed. The DNA is definitive in and of itself, and the video is there when you expect it to be there. Now, you wish that the other homes had the surveillance, but if they didn't have it, then it becomes a moot point. So that's not a defect of the documentary at all. I wish I had more video. I wish the states took more video so I would have more video. But look, you know, when I first came across this whole line of argument, I thought to myself, the bad thing here, I'll tell you what I think is the weak point of the whole documentary. And the weak point of the documentary is acknowledged in the documentary, which is to say, to definitively prove this fraud, it would be nice to be able to reverse engineer the process and go back and find those ballots and look at them. But you can't do that because once the ballot is taken out of the envelope, the two pieces of evidence are permanently separated with the name and the signature on one side and a plain ballot with just the markings on the other. And you can never go back and put those pieces back together again. So that's the weakness of the documentary. It's actually the weakness of any case. But the good news is that from a law enforcement point of view, it's kind of like, even though you don't have the body, it's disposed of permanently. What you do have is the potential perpetrators. And so if you can get the perpetrators to fess up and talk, that's another way that you can bust the case. And that's all we're saying in the documentary. There are people saying things like, well, you didn't solve a murder. We can't solve a murder with geo-tracking. At best, you can identify some potential suspects. Or, why didn't you take your case to the Supreme Court, Dinesh? Well, because there are 10 intermediate steps that have to occur before these things happen. There has to be, the mules have to fess up and say, these guys paid me, they put me up to it. Then you go talk to those guys and they go, well, we got the money from those guys and they told us we had to do this. That's how the process finds its way into court.